Barbara Mae Tucker was last seen alive on January 15, 1980 in Gresham, Oregon. The day started like any other for her. After finishing some assignments and studying for upcoming tests, she spent time with her friend, Lori Stomps, in her room at the Ash Mountain Apartments, a student housing complex near the Mount Hood Community College campus in Gresham. Around 4 p.m., Barbara and Lori decided to check out the campus gym, but they were disappointed with the equipment and soon returned to the apartment. Barbara made them both spaghetti for dinner before heading to her class around 6:30 p.m. She had a credit procedures class from 7 to 10 p.m. She had also spoken to her mother earlier in the day and told her about her plans to have ice cream with a friend after class. Little did her mother know this was the last time she would speak to her daughter. At about 7 p.m., several people saw a woman suddenly run out of a wooded area and into the oncoming traffic on Northeast Kane Drive. Cars had to zigzag and slam on their brakes hard to avoid hitting her. One driver only just missed colliding with her. Her face was covered in mud and blood, and she was wildly waving her arms trying to get the passing cars to stop. But no one did. A man also ran out of the woods, grabbed Barbara's arm, and dragged her back into the trees. At the time, some of the witnesses thought the pair were just messing around or playing a game of dares. Some thought it was a prank. Others believed the woman might be on drugs, while a few assumed they were hitchhikers. Another person who apparently didn't see her later reported to the police that they had heard a scream. As the horrifying scene unfolded on Northeast Kane Drive, no one knew that the young woman desperately running for her life was Barbara Mae Tucker, a beloved daughter, sister, and friend with a bright future ahead. Barbara Mae Tucker was born on February 25, 1960 in Portland, Oregon, to Louise and Albert Tucker. She was the youngest of 7 children, the baby of the family. Affectionately called Barbie by her family and friends, she was outgoing, smart, and independent. Being almost 6 feet tall and a natural athlete, she was the star of the Cleveland High School basketball team. Beyond sports, Barbara had many artistic talents too. She loved music and could often be found writing songs and poems or playing her guitar. Her fingers were equally skilled at knitting, crocheting, and sewing. She even designed and stitched her own clothes. Barbara was a dreamer with big goals. She was very interested in marketing and wanted to open her own craft supply shop one day. So after graduating from Cleveland High in 1978, she decided to study business management at Mount Hood Community College in Gresham, which was just 16 miles from Portland.
She was planning to get a degree in business at the college.
While at college, Barbara joined Distributive Education Clubs of America, also known as DECA, an international organization that nurtures future leaders and entrepreneurs. As an enthusiastic DECA member, she actively participated in various events, earning numerous awards along the way. Her teachers and classmates knew her as a hard worker who never missed her classes. Being career-oriented, she spent the summer of 1979 working at Sears and Jafco to learn about the retail industry. After she finished college in the spring of 1980, Barbara wanted to get a job as a buyer for a big retail store. This would help her learn everything she needed to know to open her own store one day. She was well on her way to success when her life was tragically cut short on the evening of January 15, 1980. The following morning around 8 a.m., a student discovered Barbara's body in a shrub-covered area on the south end of the main campus near the lake parking lot. She was partially clothed, naked from the waist down. Her purse, some books, and her red wool gloves were scattered nearby. The police were called immediately and promptly arrived at the scene. They sealed the area and initiated an extensive search for clues. Investigators found 3 large pools of blood and drag marks in the soil nearby. Her clothes and skin were covered in dirt, suggesting a struggle and indicating that she had not gone willingly with her attacker. Barbara's body was sent for an autopsy, which revealed that she had been sexually assaulted and had died almost instantly from multiple blows to the head with a heavy object. The object itself was never found. The autopsy report also confirmed that Barbara had suffered catastrophic blunt force trauma to her head, causing extensive skull fractures and collapsing one of her eye sockets. The medical examiners also found semen inside Tucker's vagina and on a towel that someone had draped over her naked body the day she was found. In 1980, the technology to match the semen to a specific person using DNA didn't exist. So, the investigators saved it, knowing that one day they might be able to test it. The blood found near Barbara's body was also analyzed and determined to be type O, which matched her blood type. As part of the investigation, the police interviewed the eyewitnesses, hoping to get a description of the attacker. They also questioned 95% of the students who had attended night classes on campus that day. To get the best possible description, the police even hypnotized a witness whose identity remained confidential. This helped them get a very clear picture of what the suspect looked like. Based on the descriptions gathered, a composite sketch of the attacker was created. He was described as a clean-shaven white man in his early 20s, with a strong build, broad shoulders, and a square neck. He had dark eyes and eyebrows, high cheekbones, and an olive complexion. He was around 6 feet tall with black or dark hair and wore a navy blue nylon ski jacket, horizontally stitched gray pants, and a round ski cap. The police also interviewed a man who was initially thought to have been near the murder scene around 7 p.m. He had been seen waiting for a westbound Tri-Met bus at Northeast Kane and 23rd. However, it turned out he was not as close to the crime scene as initially believed, and he couldn't provide any helpful information to the police. In a desperate attempt to recover the murder weapon, the Multnomah County Fire Department drained the artificial lake on the Mount Hood campus, but their search produced no results. The student body even offered a $1,000 reward for information, yet no one stepped forward with knowledge of the culprit. Despite numerous tips and leads investigated in the initial weeks, the case remained unsolved. The trail seemed to have gone cold, leaving Barbara's family and the Mount Hood community desperate for answers. Following the horrific incident, campus security measures were significantly increased during night classes. Security cars drove around the area regularly, and students started walking in groups, often carrying pepper spray or other things to protect themselves. Fear and worry spread across the campus as everyone tried to deal with the shocking news of what had happened to Barbara. Barbara's death shattered her family, leaving behind so much pain that not even time could heal. Her father, Albert Tucker, was never the same. His children recall the day they heard the news. It was the first time they ever saw their normally composed father break down and cry. In the weeks, months, and years that followed, Albert's pain was evident to all who knew him. He would abruptly leave the room whenever Barbara's name was mentioned, unable to bear the weight of his grief. Sadly, he passed away in 1989, never finding closure for the loss of his beloved daughter. Barbara's mother, Louise, grieved in her own way. She held on to everything Barbara left behind, treasuring them as precious reminders of her daughter's life. In a touching tribute, she planted a single yellow rose in their family garden. The rose bloomed each spring, growing tall and strong, just like Barbara. The fact that no one stopped to help Barbara deeply upset Louise. She couldn't understand why people didn't help someone who was clearly in trouble. Louise also blamed herself for Barbara's death, since she had allowed her to move to Gresham for college. On the night Barbara died, it was raining. Louise felt Barbara had got a ride from someone she didn't know to avoid the bad weather. This thought haunted her. She believed that if Barbara had stayed closer to home, she wouldn't have needed a ride from someone she didn't know. One of her siblings or her father could have dropped her, and she would still be alive. Louise also wrote many letters to the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office, asking for justice and answers about her daughter's death. She wanted more than anything to see her killer brought to justice. Sadly, Louise died in 1995, still feeling sad, guilty, and without closure. For her family, the saddest part was that Barbara would forever remain 19 years old, frozen in time in memories and pictures. They would never see her grow into a woman, start a career, get married, or have children. Barbara's childhood best friend, Maria Adrian, was also deeply affected by her murder. As Maria got married and had children, she anxiously waited for them to reach the milestones that Barbara never had the chance to experience. It wasn't until her children graduated from college, got married, and started their own families that Maria could finally find a sense of peace. For 20 years, no one knew who killed Barbara. It was like a wound that wouldn't heal for her loved ones. But in 2000, a new clue appeared that gave everyone hope that they might finally find out the truth and get justice for Barbara. Semen samples taken during Barbara's autopsy were sent to the Oregon State Police Crime Lab for analysis, and a DNA profile was developed. The profile was entered into the GEDmatch database, and in 2021, a match finally surfaced. A genealogist with Parabon Nanolabs identified Robert Plimpton as a possible source of the unknown DNA profile developed in 2000. Through genetic genealogy, genealogists were able to trace Plimpton's family tree through distant relatives, eventually narrowing the search down to him as the likely suspect. This breakthrough led the police to focus their investigation on Plimpton. Gresham detectives tracked Plimpton down to Troutdale and started watching him closely. During their surveillance, they picked up a piece of chewing gum he had spit out while biking along the Sandy River. When the Oregon State Police Crime Lab tested the gum, the DNA matched the DNA from the swabs taken from Barbara's body decades earlier. This was the break they needed. On June 8, 2021, police arrested Robert Plimpton as he was leaving his Troutdale home. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of first-degree rape and sexual assault.
Next matter, page 17, line.
Robert Plimpton of Troutdale in court Wednesday to face murder, rape, and sex abuse charges. This virtual hearing is long overdue, to say the least.
Plimpton pleaded not guilty, denying all charges against him. Awaiting trial, he was imprisoned at the Multnomah County Detention Center, and his bail was set at $500,000. This was the first arrest in Barbara's case, 41 years after her death. After his arrest, details about Plimpton's past criminal behavior emerged. Oregon Department of Corrections records revealed that Plimpton had been convicted of kidnapping in 1985 and spent 30 months in prison. He also served 2 other 6-month terms in prison between 1993 and 1997 for drunk driving and breaking the terms of his parole. In 1997, Plimpton was even arrested for a similar crime to Barbara's case. He was accused of attacking a woman, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. Court records showed that police believed Plimpton had driven the woman to a secluded area and assaulted her. An officer later found the woman crying and injured. However, a grand jury decided there wasn't enough proof to take the case to trial, so the charges were dismissed. Robert Plimpton's wife, Lisa, was shocked by his arrest and said that her husband strongly denied killing Barbara Tucker. He had left his past criminal life behind and had been clean and sober for the last 25 years. At the time of Barbara's murder, Lisa and Robert were 15 and 16-year-old students at Reynolds High School in Troutdale. Robert only knew of the case from news reports at the time. At the time of his arrest, the couple had been married for 18 years, and they had a son together. Robert Plimpton's defense opted for a bench trial before Multnomah County Circuit Court Judge Amy Baggio instead of a grand jury. The trial began on February 26, 2024. Plimpton's defense team used multiple strategies to argue he was not guilty. First, they argued that the lack of physical trauma found during Tucker's autopsy suggested the possibility of consensual sex between Plimpton and Tucker up to 12 hours before the alleged attack. They also questioned the significance of the DNA evidence and criticized investigators for not testing Tucker's clothing for DNA. This evidence could have potentially identified the person who assaulted her. They questioned the investigators' decision not to conduct this seemingly obvious test, suggesting a potential oversight and negligence in the investigation process. Furthermore, the defense highlighted discrepancies between Plimpton and the eyewitnesses' descriptions. While Plimpton was bald at the time of the trial, he had thick red hair as a teenager, a detail none of the eyewitnesses recalled. More significantly, the witness who had the clearest view of Tucker and her attacker described the man as taller than Tucker. In reality, while Plimpton was 5 feet 8 inches tall, he was not as tall as Tucker, who was nearly 6 feet in height. These arguments aimed to weaken the case against Plimpton and raise doubts about his involvement in the crime. The prosecution countered the defense's arguments with several key points. They argued that the severity of Tucker's injuries indicated that she was likely beaten too severely to resist Plimpton by the time he assaulted her. They further emphasized that there was no evidence of any prior relationship between Tucker and Plimpton. They concluded by highlighting that the torn clothing, the position of Tucker's body, and the presence of Plimpton's semen clearly proved that Plimpton had assaulted her. On March 15, 2024, following a 20-day trial, Judge Baggio found Robert Plimpton guilty. He was convicted on 1 count of murder in the first degree and 4 counts of different theories of murder in the second degree. She did not convict Plimpton of sexual assault because the prosecution couldn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these crimes happened while Tucker was still alive. However, there was no doubt that Plimpton brutally beat Barbara Tucker to death. He was sent to the Multnomah County Detention Center, awaiting his sentencing hearing. Plimpton's guilty verdict brought a wave of emotion to the courtroom. 2 of Barbara Tucker's sisters who had been there for the whole trial, couldn't hold back their tears. Their entire family had been hurting ever since Barbara's terrible death. Their parents had died seeking justice for her, without knowing who was responsible. The verdict brought up all those painful feelings again. Their tears showed how much it meant to them to finally see justice done after 44 years. On Thursday, October 3rd, 2024, Judge Kelly Skye sentenced Plimpton to life in prison, with a minimum of 40 years to be served. He was transferred into the custody of the Oregon Department of Corrections, where he will remain for the duration of his sentence. While the conviction of Robert Plimpton brings some closure to Barbara's loved ones, it cannot erase the pain of her loss, nor can it fully mend the wounds inflicted on her family and loved ones. Barbara's tragic case is a perfect example of the bystander effect, where people are less likely to help someone in danger when others are around. Several people saw her running and crying for help, but no one stopped. They wrongly assumed it was a prank and drove by without helping her. This inaction cost Barbara her life. Barbara's own words echo the dreams she was never able to fulfill. "I want to travel as far as I can go. I want to reach the joy that's in my soul and change the limitations that I know and feel my mind and spirit grow. I want to live, exist to be, and hear the truth inside of me." The haunting question remains: could Barbara be alive today if someone had acted? Let her story be a call to never turn a blind eye to those in need,